Do not despise prophecies, but test everything. Hold fast what is good. Abstain from every form of evil. Test everything. Test everything.
Imagine developing and executing a social experiment to test for bad faith actors in the community.
Just build the biggest building in town.
There are some buildings that are condemned for a reason.
Look, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not...
The people who are the best on this. Oh, Dr. Josh and Matt Delonte.
I've heard him refer to promoting positive atheism, but when you look up the definition, it really means the opposite of what he seems to promote.
No way.
Really?
That's the definition of promote. That's what I was thinking of when I thought of promote, which I think is sort of the... I don't know if it's standard. I don't think that the Bible, particularly the Hebrew Bible, promotes slavery.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, we really have to define promote here, because if you ask me, does the Bible promote slavery? I would say no, I don't think it promotes it.
But Josh is exactly right here. It would have been responsible for us to define our terms up front. Well, guess what? The other side takes endorsed to mean gives tacit approval.
He kept citing tons of external sources, which are all irrelevant. If the issue is what does the Bible promote, then what an external source has to say about the Bible is completely irrelevant.
I honestly think it's the best thing to do, maybe not to mention me, but to mention like specialists, say your argument and what you think about it. And then I think you can say, I think it's good to say, look, I don't have a specialization in this, but look, these scholars that do.
Starts quoting all of these other people as if that makes them right. Look, I've read this guy's work and this woman's work and this person's work, and they say this and they say this and they say this, and therefore, Matt's an idiot who's wrong.
That doesn't mean that it's right, but it adds weight to my argument.
Goes on this like tangent where he's like, don't bring up scholarship, especially if it's against me.
It's very easy to read these ancient texts in an English translation and think that you know exactly what it's saying. Since here on YouTube on slavery in the Hebrew Bible, the opinions and conclusions of these highly trained experts in the field are either unknown or just ignored.
Yeah, some sort of experiment.
Experiment? I'd rather have wintergreen. What are you talking about?
Gary Vaynerchuk once said that there are two ways to build the biggest building in town. One is to tear down everyone else's building to make your building look big. The other is to build the biggest building in town.
I think about succeeding in one very simple story. There are two ways, my friends, to build the biggest building in town. Step number one, just build the biggest building in town. Step number two, build a decent sized building and then spend all your time trying to tear down everybody else's building around you down so you end up being the biggest building in town. My friend, 95% of people try to do number two.
Of course, that doesn't mean we should never tear down a building. There are some buildings that are condemned for a reason, because they pose a threat. And thus, some positions in the community are dangerous and pose a threat. You shouldn't rely on having to tear down someone else's stuff. You should be able to build up your own position. Now, there are some positions, though, that are dangerous. You might say they're not up to code, and thus they need tearing down. Let's face it, we've taken different paths, we have different strengths, different weaknesses, different backgrounds, but we're not all that different. If you're anything like me, you know the struggle. Intellectuals are called know-it-alls and constantly ask, why are you always looking into everything? Why do you need to know that? Why are you always asking these questions? So we're not so different. We're all searching. What is true? What is truth? I believe if we set aside our differences in pursuit of truth, we could add things to each other that the other side may not have considered. I just hope to add value and to improve the conversation, to make a more productive conversation. I'm looking through the fence to see what insights I can gain from those who are on the other side. But we're starting with different foundations. So let's be honest, it's no wonder we end up at different places. We are upset when people tell us that there's a hole in your foundation. Why? Because with your starting points, everything must be deconstructed before you can move forward. And starting over is like an insult. It implies incompetence. But why should we take it personal? After all, what are we building a foundation for? Some type of storage facility where people are welcome to store their unfounded biases as long as they'll fit in your conveniently sized unit? This is a very narrow approach. Rather, we should build a great library with our fundamental and foundational documents that are vetted and trustworthy to lead us toward a better life, and more importantly, toward truth. The communication level, low as ever. The conversation, toxic as ever. Most debates seem like posturing matches, parodies of actual dialogue. Debates are for winning, not for comparing ideas. I started this journey to improve the conversation, and I asked myself a couple of things. How am I contributing negatively to the conversation? And how can I positively impact the conversation? If you've been around for a while, you know as well as I do, no one debate is going to change someone's mind or worldview significantly in one setting. So what shall I do? I set out to reach someone on the other side with a simple experiment. So I wanted to do a kind of a social experiment and see if I could come up with a way to definitely show whether somebody was being a bad faith actor or not. And honestly, it's not actually that easy. I have been preparing kind of data for the last 10 to 12 months or so, maybe a little over a year. But I started with a few different people, and it's changed completely since. I think I started with Vosh and Doug from Pine Creek and a few others, but then it kind of evolved from there and took its own life in its own direction. And the gist of it is I began to ask atheists online
on the line
what was the most damning topic against Christians. What was the thing that holds atheists back the most? And I got many different answers, but there was a common thread. There was a pattern. So I began to ask atheists online, what is the biggest thing holding you back from Christianity? And the number one response I got was because of all the immoral things like slavery. And so I began to ask, well, who is the best on this topic? And I kept getting the same answers. Matt Delonte and Dr. Josh. So here's the stages of this series that led up to this debate. Number one, I had all these conversations on Discord and other platforms asking atheists, what do you believe is the worst thing for the Bible? The most harsh thing that makes you not want to be a Christian? Oh, it's immoral things like slavery in the Bible. Number two, who's the best people to talk about this with? Who's the people who are the best on this? Oh, Dr. Josh and Matt Delonte. Okay, so next I want to talk to them. So I began to consume all of Dr. Josh's content and read his book on the topic. I ended up liking him and saying, oh, well, this makes a lot of sense. Even till today, I still get Christians asking me, why do you defend Dr. Josh? You're going to find out in this series, like, why I defend him partially. I can't defend him on everything because we don't agree on everything, and I don't agree with everything he says or does. Then I moved on to consuming all of Matt's content on the topic and on related topics that have some overlap. And then finally, I thought at first I would debate Dr. Josh on the topic and get him to take this, but after reading his book and seeing his material, I realized he's not going to probably take this debate. And so I offered it to Matt. And Matt gets paid to do these things, but he turned it down. And I thought, well, maybe he's smarter than that. And so I went into a book club Discord where Dr. Josh was, and we were talking about one of his books. And I asked him about this. I said, hey, Matt was going to debate me. I offered Matt a debate, I should say, on this topic, does the Bible promote slavery? And he turned it down. And he said, well, yeah, I'd turn it down too. I don't think the Bible does promote slavery. So I would turn that down as well. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Well, I sent James an email and said, he turned it down, whatever. He's probably smarter than that. He tries to stay away from this pro usage of the term anyway. So maybe he just, he's smarter than that. And James said, well, hang on. Let me offer him more money at a different time and maybe he'll accept it. And I thought, okay. Well, he did accept it. And I thought, wow. So now I have Dr. Josh saying he doesn't think the Bible promotes slavery, so he wouldn't take that debate. And then I have Matt now accepting the debate. So what I did was, I know how Matt tries to stay away from the pro usage. He uses other terms to make it seem like he's using like a for or a pro or a positive affirmative use of the terms in regards to slavery in the Bible. But he will never outright say the Bible's for it. One of the key differences I noticed between Matt and Dr. Josh was that Matt specifically goes back to buildings that he previously occupied in order to search for flaws to tear them down, never building his own building. Dr. Josh instead acts as an inspector who has been trained in the field of construction and looks at the code of the building. Here, code means something like scholarship, and he attempts to use his credentials to enforce these codes on current buildings. I think this is a much better approach, although I think it has its shortcomings as well, because sometimes people are trained to enforce codes on older buildings that are not themselves in the same category as a modern building. A lot of people are saying, like, man, you guys just should have defined your terms up front. Matt even did a review saying, like, well, this happens all the time. We talk about it all the time on my channel. We should have defined our terms up front. It happens in debates all the time with Matt. Dr. Josh even said in a partial review he did that they really should have defined their terms up front. Well, here's a secret I'll let you guys in on. I did, and it was kind of prophetic, like a prophecy that came true. I said, I want to stick with this promote use in the title because typically some other terms will be used, like condone or endorse. And to one side of the audience, it sounds like the Bible condoning or endorsing slavery is the Bible's for it. It thinks it's a good thing. It's pro-slavery. And to the other side of the audience, it's, well, yeah, it allowed for it at some time in history. So why don't we just get the vague, like, misunderstandings out of the way, and we'll have a clear conversation about the matter. Well, even that didn't work. Matt says in his review that he spent all this time researching what promote meant, and he says, I should have reached out to see what he meant by it because it happens all the time, but I didn't. I find it hard to believe that you spent all this time researching the term and what it meant and how it's used and so forth, and didn't ask me how it's used. So I want to start actually with Matt's recollection of events and just see what he thinks happened, the way that he describes things happening, and with the background that I just gave you about my whole process in this kind of journey. Is it more likely that Matt just, strung together some notes and then decided to try and make this about a semantic dispute? Or that I had went through and planned this step by step from the beginning? Just trust me, there's a method to my madness. I've spoken to both of these guys on different occasions, got different results on the same topic. Now, of course, they have different ideas, different temperaments, different approaches. The main difference, as I noticed, though, is that Matt seems like he approaches dialogue antagonistically, and he's very argumentative, compulsive, and he lacks basic self-control over his emotions. In an intellectual discussion, you should set aside your emotional outburst and try to get at what is the intellectual content at which they're arriving to their position. Josh was more like, yeah, I don't take that position. I take more of a position like what Caraquinho argues in his book. And even if he disagrees, he makes clear why he doesn't take the position you do and why he takes the position that he does. But he wasn't just polite. He said some very respectful things about me in regards to our debate community as a whole that I'm not going to reproduce here because it would sound like I was bragging. Next, Matt wasn't familiar at all with the scholarship. He always brings up people like Ray Comfort and Ken Ham. But when asked even about pretty basic or well-known scholars in this field and related fields, he seemed to have zero familiarity. Josh, on the other hand, was familiar with them, had read some of their works, and he even suggested to me other articles that I would enjoy, saying, yeah, I think given your position, you would like this article by this scholar. Like trying to help me with my position, pretty much. And I'm thinking, well, that's intellectually honest. And we're going to go through a lot of different books and papers, one being Dr. Josh's books. Also, I want to go through the Philosopher's Toolkit and some others that are related. But there's a danger here that although I'm kind of bragging on Josh and trying to say that his approach is much better and should be used by atheists instead of Matt's approach, there's still a danger that Josh may grow to resent me using his name a lot, as well as comparing him with Matt. Because, well, after all, they're friends, and Matt promotes Josh's books on his channel, and Josh, he's about to put out a new book. I'm sure he'd like to promote that book as well. So, although I may alienate Josh, I feel compelled to put out my findings for intellectual consistency, and I hope that he will bear with me. Thanks for checking this out. Up next, part 2 of the series, where we begin with Matt's debate review. Not to worry, my friends. I'm not just going to give you an introduction and leave you with no content. So I'm actually going to give you a preview of the next part in the series. But first, I feel obligated to say a couple of things about this project and about this subject in general. First, just want to make clear that I don't think that of myself as a specialist. I look toward the specialists for their opinions, and I'm hoping that anyone who does happen to watch this, they take what I'm saying and go research. I know I shouldn't even have to say that, but you have to understand that I'm preempting like 400 comments right now. So you think you're a specialist? So you're convincing people that you're an expert, huh? No, of course not. Do your own research, people. No matter who it comes from. Even if I were a specialist in this field, specialists disagree all the time. That should be all the more reason to do your own research independently. Research the data yourself. Okay, with that out of the way, number 2 is, listen, you guys, I'm not against Matt. Okay, I'm trying to make the conversation better. And I actually agree with Matt on a lot. And I feel like he sometimes brings a more logical case to the table than many of the theists he talks to, even ones that I know and are friends with. And I believe a lot of theists and Christians, more specifically, think this as well. The issue is when Matt goes beyond an intellectual discussion into an emotional, accusatory tirade or diatribe. The issue is that I've consumed a lot of Matt's content. And so I have heard people call in and literally say, Matt, you are my idol. Matt, you are like a father figure to me. So you're not going to be open to me if you're one of these type of people who grew up with Matt, who Matt is nostalgic for you. I've been listening to Dillahunty debate different people for, I would say, around 7 years, somewhere around that time frame. And sometimes I thought he did terrible, and sometimes I thought he did great. It just depends. But I'm just taking the advice of some atheists that I frequently hang out with and interact with when they talk about debating theists and how you kind of have to say up front, like, look, dude, just listen, I'm not trying to deconvert you.
Because it's not about saying you're wrong or here's my argument, checkmate, right? It's like, let's just find out where we disagree and then go off and think about it.
Still seems, I think, argumentative and combative from the point of view, though, of someone who's disagreeing. That's sort of one of the problems of it. You've got to somehow get the person into that position where, like, look, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not.
You got to convince them that you're not their enemy first.
Yeah, this is like what Danny was saying, right? Like, it's like herding cats sometimes. Like, you got to be really gentle and like one false move and they run away.
It's so true. People are allergic to views that contradict their views. I mean, listen, I'm not going to hurt you. Just keep an open mind as we go through this, and who knows, you might even enjoy. Flips the word allow into a large list of words that mean to be for. So he jumps in and out of the pro usage.
To say that to promote something means to further the progress of, or allow, or encourage, or sanction, support, back, endorse, advocate. I went through this list of synonyms to show that what we mean when we say the Bible's promoting this is that it's allowing it, it's advocating, etc. When we're talking about the Bible promoting slavery, advocating slavery, endorsing slavery, sanctioning slavery, regulating slavery,
he adds in the term regulation as a synonym. Regulation and allow are not synonyms of promote.
If the entire debate is about whether or not promote simply means I took out an advertisement to encourage this as if I'm the promoter of it, then we've all had our time wasted.
This is obviously a straw man. Matt used it in his opening, and it's just as ridiculous as the caricature that it is. The Atheist Experience is produced by the Atheist Community of Austin. The Atheist Community of Austin is organized as a nonprofit educational corporation to develop and support the atheist community,
to provide opportunities for socializing and friendship, to promote secular viewpoints, to encourage positive atheist culture. Now, if you look at all of those, they're all pros or positives. They're actively supporting the atheist community, providing opportunities for socializing and friendship, promoting secular viewpoints, and encouraging positive atheist culture. But why am I having to explain this to adults? Let's just look at Matt explicitly using promote in a positive sense.
So some pagans are surprised when I don't, give respect and deference to whatever their beliefs are, and some of them have been upset when I wouldn't promote their religious views or their specific community.
He makes a distinction here between respect and show indifference toward and promote something. But I know what you're thinking. Yeah, Converse, but that's the way he used to use it. He uses it in a different way now. Look at the date on the screen. Yeah, that's right. I started with one from after the debate. And this next one.
The way it's been presented to me, and because of what you said about how it's often been presented to you, they're not promoting. They're not trying to convert people. This is a personal thing.
Again, the difference between allowing someone to hold a personal belief and someone actually promoting a belief.
Sure. I wanted to ask Matt that I've often heard him refer to promoting positive atheism, but when you look up the definition, it really means the opposite of what he seems to promote.
No way.
Really?
Here the caller accuses Matt of using a term in the opposite way of how it's usually defined. Are we in Inception or something right now?
You done it before?
But Matt doesn't back off and say, oh, you're using promote wrong. Instead, he doubles down and says, well, no, I'm not getting away from promoting positive atheism.
He formulates his own versions. So when I joined the atheist community of Boston, the intro for the show included a line, welcome to Atheist Experience, but it had been included promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state.
The tagline of his show was promoting positive atheism.
But I asked the question when I first joined the ACA, what do we mean by positive atheism? Because there's two different usages. One, positive atheism would be affirming atheism, which some people might view as strong or hard atheism in the philosophic sense. And the other connotation is putting a positive light on atheism. Which one do you think is the right definition?
Come on, man. The semantic games. Matt knows what people mean by positive atheism, especially in the context this guy was using. I know Matt's not that inept at philosophy or just language in general. Matt knows what he means. And then he goes, well, positive atheism could just mean that atheism's not so bad. It's positive. It's not negative. Pro tip. Always define your terms before the debate, which we will see later that I did, and Matt didn't. But in case you don't have time or you can't reach out to the person, just go to Twitter, type in their name and the term, and you'll see all the usages of the term, either by them or by people tagging them. We need our culture to promote a love of truth and demonstrable understanding, obviously using the term in a pro or affirmative sense. Okay, going down the list. Who's next? Holy cool. I want to show you first, like a half dozen times, Matt keeps using terms interchangeably with promote and tries to drag me down this semantic dispute.
Sanctions, endorses, and promotes, unless you want to use some if you're going to try to win by saying, well, it doesn't promote because it endorses, but it doesn't promote, then this is just a waste of time, because the point is the Bible allows for slavery.
Words have distinctions for a reason. For example, I may not promote a candidate as being a good candidate, but I may endorse them in the election because of who they're running against. Noam Chomsky points this out.
What did you make of Bernie's endorsement of Biden?
Right now, the issue of greatest urgency is to get rid of the malignancy in the White House. Top priority. Now, perhaps Sanders concluded that the best way to end this malignancy now is to try to unify the opposition, which is not much to write home about aside from him.
Now, whether you agree with him on politics or not, the point stands. Just to give you a quick example, I may endorse the back of my paycheck where it says endorse here. Doesn't mean that's what I think I'm worth. But we make decisions on endorsement based on what's best for us at the time. And frankly, I find it incredible that Matt doesn't understand distinction in language. That Matt doesn't think the half dozen terms he's using interchangeably don't have nuances that delineate their meanings.
You know, words have many different nuances, right?
Countered that in my opening, along with your attempt to define promote rather narrowly.
So Matt brought it up in his opening and planted the semantic dispute seed of, hey, look, you've wasted our time if you want to challenge me on the way I'm using promote. Then, in the first clip we saw, he waters that seed by saying, so if you're going to try and claim victory by trying to define promote other than endorse, then we've all had our time wasted again.
If you're going to try to win by saying, well, it doesn't promote because it endorses, but it doesn't promote, then this is just a waste of time.
Now here he says, yeah, I countered that along with your attempt to define promote rather narrowly. Again, I never defined the term promote. The only thing I did was play a clip of me asking Dr. Josh why he wouldn't take a debate entitled, Does the Bible Promote Slavery? And he just responded, because I don't think it does.
The issue here is, does the Bible support slavery? And it sure sounds like you're saying, you say no, but then it sure sounds like you're saying, yeah, it promotes slavery, but it needs to do that because we have to have milk until we're ready for solid food. It promoted it once upon a time, but then it reverses it.
And of course, I never said anything like that. I never said that the Bible supported or promoted slavery and then later on reversed it. I have always maintained that the Bible allowed for a barbaric institution, for a barbaric group of people, because it was the norm of the day, but it made developments that improved the humanity significantly. And just like if God was going to reveal something to me today about science, he would not reveal something to me that I couldn't understand about quantum physics and that we're going to know about in the year 4040. He would reveal something to me like, doesn't an apple fall from a tree at 9.8 meters per second squared? Well, maybe in reality that's not really the case, but he would do that to me because otherwise he can't communicate with me.
Because it's clear the Bible does sanction and endorse slavery, and you're saying that was necessary, which is already an admission that the Bible does do it.
Does do what? See, Matt is indicating to the audience that I just gave some type of admission that the Bible does do it. Now, I want you to pay attention to what's happening here. Endorse and promote do not always mean the same thing. So basically, he says, if you think there's a distinction between endorse and promote, then you've wasted our time. He then moves to the issue is, does the Bible support slavery? And while you say you don't, it sure sounds like you think the Bible promotes slavery, which is just a disagreement. It just sounds like he's not listening. Then Matt wants to bring up sanction and endorse, and by this time, Matt's audience has been convinced that sanction, endorse, promote, allow all mean the same thing. You don't believe that. You're like, oh, that's a straw man. Look at the comments.
You guys, it's obvious. I use a very persnickety definition. Wonder where I got that phrasing. Very narrow definition. No one uses it like that.
It's so unfortunate because Matt's leading his fans down this same path, like this guy on Twitter. It's not a lame argument. If you're allowing something and regulating it, you're not against it and don't think it's bad. Dr. Josh says the Bible condones slavery. What? You didn't say condone, you said promote. You're shifting the goalpost. Condone and promote are the same thing. If you're promoting something, you're condoning it, right? Promote means to attract people's attention to a product or event. In this case of slavery, the product are people. And the Bible and these passages are attracting attention to slavery by regulating it. I mean, it's okay to be a fan of someone because he makes you feel good about your position or whatever, but like when you go to the point of absurdity to defend someone, it actually makes you look like a sycophant. It's quite discouraging.
My opponent played a clip of Dr. Joshua Bowen and claimed that he had a multi-hour conversation with him and that Josh disagreed with me on whether or not the Bible promotes slavery, which is really, really strange considering that Dr. Josh was my debate partner the very last time I debated the Bible and slavery at Modern Day Debates.
It's funny that he says that like a gotcha when that was the entire point.
Debates. And it's curious because what he tried to do was to get Josh to accept a very particular definition of promote.
I love this. I'm going to play you the clip here in a minute. He claims here that I tried to get Dr. Josh to accept a very particular definition of promote. I never defined it once to Josh either. Only an imbecile would use it the way Matt uses it. The only thing I said to Dr. Josh is, yeah, Matt turned down a debate with me recently over the topic, does the Bible promote slavery? And his immediate response was, yeah, I wouldn't take that debate because I don't believe it does. I never said, and this is what I mean by promote, this very particular definition.
And say, well, I'm not sure I'd say the Bible would promote it in that sense. But William played the video clip as if Dr. Josh was disagreeing with my position, and that's not true at all.
Notice he didn't say Dr. Josh disagrees with my definition, but my position. That's an important distinction that will become clear. Also, this is my opening statement. I'm just using what I had prepared before. I'm not countering and saying, look, Josh disagrees with his position. Look at this clip. Yeah, Converse, but as everybody on Matt's side points out, you probably misrepresented him. Well, he's commented on it recently. Let's see.
So, very, very briefly, I had a conversation with William, Converse contender, the week leading up to the debate, and we talked about, some aspects of it. It was a nice long conversation. It was really nice. If we're defining promote as like, hey, you need to go see this concert, and this concert's awesome. Yeah, you should go see it. I mean, it's really, really great. Here, I really want you to go see it. You need to go see it. And somebody says, I don't really want to go. Oh, come on, but you really should. Right? I feel like that's the definition of promote. That's what I was thinking of when I thought of promote, which I think is sort of the, I don't know if it's standard, but I mean, it's just the one that I always think about. Obviously so in that sense, I don't think that the Bible, particularly the Hebrew Bible, promotes slavery.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. It's why I use the word endorse. That was part of the problem that I saw with the whole setup of the debate. It was like, well, I mean, we really have to define promote here, because if you ask me, does the Bible promote slavery? I would say, no, I don't think it promotes it.
Because what he tried to do was to get Josh to accept a very particular definition of promote and then say, well, I'm not sure I'd say the Bible would promote it in that sense. But William played the video clip as if Dr. Josh was disagreeing with my position, and that's not true at all.
The reason why that's not true at all is because I didn't play the video clip as if he disagreed with your position. This was my opening, so I wasn't trying to counter something and say, look, Dr. Josh disagrees with him. I was just showing the way Josh and I both used the term. So I wasn't saying that Josh disagreed with your position, that the Bible allows for slavery at some point, but your definition of promote. But Josh is exactly right here. It would have been responsible for us to define our terms up front. Well, guess what? That's right. I called it. Take a look. But I would like to stay with that title. Does the Bible promote slavery? Because most of the time the debate is over, does the Bible endorse slavery? And one side takes endorse to mean promotes, and the other side takes endorse to mean gives tacit approval. Matt has had this same problem in at least a dozen debates, and he makes the same mistake, and then at the end of his review he goes, and this is pretty much the only thing I learned from the debate is to define your terms up front. What? You just learned that after debate 100? Or whatever it is right now?
My opponent was so eager to say that I was wrong. He kept citing tons of external sources, which are all irrelevant. If the issue is what does the Bible promote, then what an external source has to say about the Bible is completely irrelevant. I can't tell you how annoyed and completely unimpressed I am every time a debate opponent shows up and starts quoting all of these other people as if that makes them right. Look, I've read this guy's work and this woman's work and this person's work, and they say this and they say this and they say this, and therefore, ha ha ha, Matt's an idiot who's wrong. No, That doesn't tell me what the Bible says, and it doesn't explain why, if God thought slavery was wrong, he did the opposite or allowed the opposite to happen.
I honestly think it's the best thing to do, maybe not to mention me, but to mention like specialists about topics. If you don't have training in the topic, you say your argument and what you think about it, and then I think you can say, I think it's good to say, look, I don't have a specialization in this, but look, these scholars that do argue for these points. That doesn't mean that it's right, but it adds weight to my argument. I think it's an important thing to do. Anyway,
he goes on this like tangent where he's like, don't bring up scholarship, especially if it's against me. I hate when people do that.
Slavery. And you have talked about Josh and Christine and pulled up a book left and right and everything else and danced away in order to suggest that I'm just wrong and secular scholars disagree with me. No evidence, no argument, just boom. And now you want to accuse me of rhetoric. I read from the Bible. I made a compelling case that is not even remotely controversial. And you're just going to suggest that I'm just spewing rhetoric in order to win.
No.
The fact of the matter is I'm right.
Not even remotely controversial, right?
I think this would be remotely controversial.
I've debated many times. There's not even any question here.
given the contentious nature of this topic, I think it is important to frame what I'm going to present with scholarly consensus. You know, we'll set aside the whole discussion about the redaction history of the Pentateuch. We'll just assume for the moment that we're going to set that aside because then that gets very complicated. But the problem is that you have passages that are kind of confusing, like Exodus 21. It's hard to tell sometimes. Are we talking about an indentured servant? Are we talking about a chattel slave? How do we understand these different laws?
Yeah, but honestly, who cares about the scholarship? You're just bringing up books.
That's the difficulty. So one of the difficulties in Exodus 21, and this came up in your debate with Mike, you're not the only ones, right? This is a debate that rages on. And I can recommend Gregory Kirikinyo's book on debt slavery. It's actually quite debated, Exodus 21. Here, a commentary is going to be a good friend.
Ugh, all this boring scholarship, a paper, an article, a monograph.
Then there are other books, other monographs that deal in depth with particular issues. So,
not other books. You're just bringing up a book left and right.
You have talked about Josh and Christine and pulled up a book left and right and everything else and danced away.
Westbrook and Wells put together, this might have been written posthumously, with all the different sections. An Introduction to Biblical Law by Morrow, which is another, he takes a slightly different view as far as biblical law is consumed. A little bit closer to being a specialized book on a particular topic was 2006, Bernard Jackson's book on the Mishpatim, slavery. What is slavery? It's on a particular section of the biblical text, and really, really great book. Again, Wisdom Laws by Bernard Jackson, 2006, excellent book. Sorry, I'll go a little bit faster here. Debt Slavery by Kirikinyo. I've mentioned this in some of the streams, but Debt Slavery in Israel and the Ancient Near East, dealing with slavery and the laws of slavery, is Cardellini's Die biblischen Sklavengesetze im Lichte des keilschriftlichen Sklavenrechts. So it's dealing with the biblical laws and how they relate to the cuneiform sources. A little book by John Collins, but it's okay. I'll find it and reference it later.
More like Borophyll. Right?
That was entirely my fault.
Before we dive into the details, I wanted to cite some of my sources so that you can check my work and follow along.
You know what book you haven't pulled up?
When we consider secondary sources, there is a sea of articles, monographs, and edited volumes related to slavery in the Hebrew Bible. You're going to be debating it. You want to make sure that you're widely read on the topic. I know that sounds like it should go without saying, but you want to make sure that you read the secondary literature. If you're not a specialist in the field, it can be very easy to read these ancient texts in an English translation and think that you know exactly what it's saying. However, when I hear discussions here on YouTube on slavery in the Hebrew Bible, the opinions and conclusions of these highly trained experts in the field are either unknown or just ignored.
You know what? I'm going to do something for you guys. I didn't want to tell anybody this, but I actually have a time machine. I don't want a lot of people to know, so don't tell a lot of people, but I'm going to actually travel to the future where Matt actually lets go of his childhood and ask him in his new updated form what he thinks about this question. I think we're ready to travel.
Like, look, I'm not going to hurt you.
The fact of the matter is, I'm right.